again, everyone, and welcome to Hope from Home, the show where we bring you conversations of hope from our home to yours. Today, Noel Okel gets an update from Jerusalem. Marianne Torres speaks with Marilyn Madri, who is a nurse working in a hospital in Alberta, and Deacon Pedro speaks with Glenn Beyer of Oregon Catholic Press, who gives us some very useful liturgical tips when live streaming Mass on the internet. And of course, our guests will tell us where they're finding hope from our home to yours.
Hello, David Delgado. Thanks for joining us on today's episode of Hope from Home, all the way from Jerusalem today. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Noel. How about you?
Hanging in there. Hey, listen, as the director of marketing and development there for the Notre Dame Center in Jerusalem, I was hoping that you could talk to us a little bit about the mood of the Christian community there now that the Holy Land is starting to open up again.
Sure, Noel. So, as you know, the local community here, the local Christian community, is very tight-knit. You know, it's a small community. They're highly united. Everyone knows everyone in a way. And so the initial reaction was very quick to try and contain the spread of the coronavirus, right? And the emphasis that there was concern for family health, you know, and just in general to try and really stop the spread. As you know, a lot of the families here live together, right? So you have the parents and then the kids living on top and probably the grandparents on either one of the floors or right beside the house. And so there's a big concern and there's a lot of solidarity that was shown to try to respect the rules, you know, to maintain the spread. And we had some cases where, as you may have heard, in Bethlehem, a few suspected cases were heard, and rapidly the city went into self-quarantine. You know, everyone was staying home, taking the necessary precautions. Everyone's been very patient so far. But of course, you know, it's been 2 months now, and so people are starting to ask, hey, when the church is going to open again? When can I receive communion? In another perspective as well, Holy Week this week was very special. Christians are very tied to the traditions here, you know, doing the procession on Palm Sunday, and that wasn't possible. So it was different, you know, people were reacting differently, but other way, the ingenuity and the imagination and the rapid response of, you know, going digital, live streaming masses, you know, live streaming Holy Thursday from Gethsemane, which has a limited capacity. Also, in many people, locals who haven't been to that holy hour, to be able to experience it now from their homes, right? So that's been the mood, more or less.
Is there any ideas about when the churches might be open and the sacraments available again?
Right now, we haven't heard anything yet, as of yet, officially. The expectation, and there's some rumors going around that we're hearing that after Ramadan, everything will be clearer. That's at the end of the month, at the end of Ramadan. We'll have some indication. Of course, you have to keep within the Ministry of Health's guidelines, you know. Outdoor spaces limited to 20 people. We'll see what the rules change to next, but we're still in the live stream area.
Okay. Are you hearing any stories of faith or inspirations that you can share that's coming out of the Holy Land?
You know, as I mentioned, again, this tight-knit family of the Christian community, a lot of solidarity. There's been some groups, you know, organizing food and care packages for those that are involved, those most deeply affected by this. There's an economic worry, of course, because a lot of the Christians here are involved in tourism. But, you know, you see unity, you see neighbors helping neighbors. And also, in a way, I think the pandemic has brought together, you know, the major faiths here. And so you saw a big example of this earlier in May, when the heads of all the religious communities here got together to pray for the end of the pandemic. That was very special. And so I think people are cooperating, people are united, And there's that emphasis in family unity, taking care of the family now when you can't, a lot of people are at work, so they're focusing on their families. Yeah.
I see. That's good to hear. Now, what would you say gives you hope during this particular difficult time, personally?
Personally, Noel, I've been calling colleagues around. I've been calling my colleagues and to stay in touch with them. And even though they're worried, they're saying, David, tourism has boomed in the past 3 years in the Holy Land. Lots of pilgrimages have come, and we've been keeping busy. And now I can spend a little bit of time with my kids. Of course, I want pilgrims to come back and tourism to get going again because it's our livelihood. But in a way, I feel that we're starting to value again. We're starting to value again the little things. Our family, our unity, helping each other, and so I think that gives me a lot of hope. Gives me a lot of hope that after this pandemic, people again realize the importance of like
their family life.
Yeah, family life.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dave, for talking to us today and joining us for today's episode of Hope from Home. Keep well.
You. Likewise, you too.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
I'm very happy to be joined today by Marilyn Mudry. Marilyn is a nurse at Medicine Hat Regional Hospital in Alberta, and she's here to tell us about her experience being a medical professional in the time of this pandemic. And so, Marilyn, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And so I wanted to start off by asking, how has your profession as a nurse changed since the COVID-19 outbreak?
It has changed quite a bit, mostly just with protocols, with how we go about with things. I don't know how it is over there in Toronto, but here, working in the hospital, one thing that's like obvious when you walk in is everyone has to wear masks all the time, which it's a little difficult, but just for the protection of ourselves and also the patients, but as well, in the hospital, there's not allowed any visitors. I work on a medical surgical floor where we specialize more on the orthopedic surgeries. So now all the elective like hip replacements, knee replacements, a lot of those surgeries, they have canceled them. So now instead of a more surgical approach on the floor, it's more of a medical. So we're dealing with a lot more medical patients. It has been a little difficult because just with the whole COVID, like my floor, we haven't been directly affected with COVID, but we've had patients that were possible cases that were swabbed. And I sometimes feel bad because sometimes they kind of get the stigma of the COVID, like we're a little more scared to go into the patient's room, but also like there's that fear, but at the same time, we're very limited with like the PPE, with our protective equipment. So a lot of times we kind of just, when there's a patient that is like the possible COVID, a lot of times we kind of just feel like we go in when it's necessary because we're restricted with PPE, and as well as we don't want to put ourselves at risk. So there has been definitely a change with the nursing, and as well when coming into the hospital every morning or every shift that we come in, we have to do a screening. So it's just a new, different approach of how we're doing things.
I see. Yeah, that's definitely sounds like quite a bit of changes.
Yeah.
And so how have you been coping and dealing with all of this? And how has your faith been a part of that?
Well, I've been trying a lot of, I keep in contact with like my friends. Well, with my family, they're very good because I don't live with them right now, but they are very welcoming and said that like, until you get positive COVID or you're in contact, like come and like spend time with us. So that definitely helps a lot because I have some people to kind of like talk to, and when I'm stressed, it's just kind of like I have some support and kind of just can relieve my stress with that. So my family has definitely been a big support system for me. Faith-wise, it's been hard because the churches are still closed, so it's the online. So I still kind of have that, I don't know, you feel a little bit of the disconnect because we have to do all of our liturgies online. But also with my family, we make an effort, to pray every evening together. So that's been helping a lot, because I know when I go back home and when I'm working and when I work a stretch, a lot of times I just stay home. And I know when I'm by myself, I'm just most of the time just exhausted. So I just kind of go to bed and just get ready for the next day. But I know when I'm with my family, it really helps that every evening it's like, okay, let's pray together. And that definitely helps me a lot. So yeah, my family has been a big support for me during this time.
Yeah, family and faith. That's always so important. Yeah,
Yes.
like pandemic or no pandemic, for sure.
Yes.
And so, do you have any experiences or moments from these days that you'd like to share?
I do. Working as a nurse, I feel like every day is an experience. I can actually share one this last weekend that I kind of experienced when I was working. I had a patient that had a hip fracture, and she does have a history of dementia. And we were just having a very hard time because she was just constantly like pulling on everything and just like pulling out her IVs, Foley's. So this poor lady, we had to restrain her just for her own safety so she doesn't crawl out of bed or anything. And a lot of times with if you have a history of dementia after you have like a surgery or like you get put into an environment, like they get confused. And in the past, we've had family come in, like they've helped us a lot, being like letting us know what their baseline is like, or just sometimes just a familiar face helps them settle and calm them down. So with her, it was we were just having a hard time because she was just very confused, and like we tried assessing and stuff, and it was even hard with assessments. And then I remember one afternoon, her daughter called, and she was just asking how her mom was doing, and I said, well, she's still very confused. She was doing a little bit better, like she wasn't pulling at things as much. She was a little more settled, but she was still very confused. And then her daughter was saying, yeah, she's just probably having a very hard time coping, because she's like, she does have dementia, but whenever she's experienced something new, she was saying that either her or her sister, they were always there with her. They were always her support. And so to kind of help her through like this new change, so then my heart just sunk, because the daughter was like, this is her very first time where she had to deal with something different, very different, all by herself. And then plus with the dementia, she's like, I'm not surprised. She's just very confused because she's in this new environment. She broke her hip, she had surgery. And then on top of that, she's having to deal with it by herself. So the daughter said that she did send up some books and some newspapers. So it's just something that's familiar to her. So I was like, okay, I'll find those what you sent up and I'll see if that will help. But it was just, my heart kind of sunk, because it's like, she's in this new experience and all by herself, and she doesn't have anyone to turn to. So for me, it's just the whole that the hospital's kind of is not allowing visitors right now. It's very hard, because we still have people that are sick. We still get people that are like older, elderly, that have dementia, that family helps us a lot. Or we do have people that are palliative. And even with people that are palliative, we have restrictions of only one visitor at a time, and it can only be immediate family. So we've had a couple of experiences like that on our floor where we've had patients that were palliative, and then we had to try to kind of figure out how to coordinate and like kind of work to be like, okay, we need to get family up.
The families are not able to visit those people who are sick in the hospital that they know. And so has this changed the way that you approach or treat your patients, perhaps maybe in a way that's more caring or more in place of the family?
I don't know if it changed or anything, because I know whenever I care for my patients, I've always tried to be the kindest and try like very caring towards them. And if I ever noticed a patient that wasn't getting family or anything like that, I would try to kind of talk to them more and get to know them more and kind of build a rapport. But yeah, that was something I've always tried to do. I guess, well, like for my lady, it was like trying to kind of, after the daughter told us like what might help her, I was like, okay, I will definitely try to be a little more patient with her. And but I just, yeah, with the nursing, like we've been taught and we are encouraged to do more of a holistic approach. So yeah, building those reports with the patients and everything. Every day I build new relationships with everyone. So, and working with them for more than one time, you kind of get to know them more. And yeah.
It's good to hear that you're practicing that holistic, very compassionate care all the time, and especially now in the pandemic. It's really good to hear. I also want to give you a big thank you just for being a nurse at this time. Honestly, from the bottom of my heart, like, thank you so much for what you do in your service.
You're welcome.
Glenn, it's so good to have you in the program with us today.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So Glenn, you're a liturgist. You've been in Canada. You used to work for Novalis. Now you're working for Oregon Catholic Press. What can you tell us about people? Can I say the art of watching Mass online or on TV? Is there an obligation for people to do that?
Certainly, there's an art to it. Remember that what you're doing is you're not actually attending Mass. There is no obligation. You're not required to go to church. Mm-hmm. So if the obligation is dispensed with, then what you're actually doing is you're praying at home, and you're using the internet, you're using the broadcast to really try and help your own prayer. But it is a form of personal prayer that you're doing at home.
Right. So you've obviously been doing like everybody else. We've all been tuning in, trying to watch, various streams of Mass, and then you ended up writing an article that was posted on the Oregon Catholic Press website about, I guess, can I say there was like tips or advice on?
Yeah, sure. Just my observations, what I thought worked and didn't work, what worked better, what worked not as well.
So what made you feel that it was necessary to write that article?
Well, unlike Salt and Light, we're all amateurs. We've never done this before. A lot of the people who are podcasting and live streaming their liturgies have never done anything audiovisual before. And so there is a few things that just jump out at you right away that you can say, this works better, this works not as well.
And
go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. I was going to say, and maybe the caveat is that what is liturgically appropriate when we actually are at a real Mass might have to be adjusted so that it works better for the internet or for television, correct?
I totally agree with that. The first thing that comes to mind is the entrance procession. What's really interesting is that the priest and whoever else is at the liturgy is already there. And in this case, it's the people who are processing in. I was watching St. Charles in Edmonton, and they have a video to begin the live streaming of actually walking up to the church, walking through the church doors and into the church. The people who are doing the procession are not the priest and the ministers anymore. It's the people. And so to have the priest there welcoming us as we arrive, I think that really is what we're talking about here.
Is there a comment maybe as to the best space to do that? Should it be done? I know people feel that they want to participate at a Mass in a space that they're familiar, their own parish, but is that the best location?
I'm of two minds on that one. I have seen churches live streaming in churches that are absolutely deadly. What you're doing there is you're proclaiming and you're praying out loud in a space that doesn't have the people in it. And when the people aren't in it, the reverberation, your people will tell you, the sound is terrible. And in some places, the visual isn't that great either. I've seen some churches where they have made cutouts of individual parishioners and put them in the pews so it doesn't look so empty. But maybe what we're talking about here is something different. Maybe it makes more sense. I know Father Bill Burke, who used to be at the National Liturgy Office in Ottawa, he's out in Sydney, Nova Scotia, and he broadcasts from his living room. And there are 3 people present, plus the dog, the cat, and the parrot. It's marvelous. And it's so much you're being brought into his home, into his heart. I really think there's a power there that almost makes more sense.
Right.
At the same time, people like to remember their space, the space they built. It's their home. And so I can see both sides of that argument.
Yeah, so I guess you have to look and see what it looks like on the camera and how it sounds like, because if the audio can go direct into the stream, it might work.
That would work a lot better.
You made a comment in the article that I had not thought about, but it had to do with silence, because I think that those of us that are live streaming the Mass might feel that there are no responses or it's uncomfortable to leave silence. But you suggested actually we should make room for extra silence. Why is that?
I really think so, because when you're following at home, when you're attending Mass at home or praying at home, there is so much going on. And just to give yourself that time to calm, to center, and to get rid of all the distractions. As I sit here, I'm looking around and there's all the stuff in my rooms, and it's not the same it's not the same focus as I would have if I was actually in church. Right. And so to give that rhythm that takes the time that is needed to make that work, I think it helps a lot.
And I guess alongside with that are the responses. Sometimes if I don't know what Father Bill Burke in Sydney, Nova Scotia is doing, if he's celebrating Mass by himself, is he also doing the responses himself? Does that
He
help?
actually has 2 people that are staying in his house, and they're doing the responses, which is good. I saw 2 in the cathedral in Winnipeg where there was actually somebody at the microphone making the responses.
Right.
And that makes a real difference, because the whole point of a communal celebration is that we respond together. So if the priest says, "The Lord be with you," and I say, "And also with you," and I'm the only one, where is it? So to have that voice is really, really important.
Yes. And just to be sure, it's "and with your spirit." Come on.
I'm an old man.
What about music?
Music is really tricky. I work for a music publisher, and we are just looking around trying to figure out what makes the most sense.
Right.
I think some of the best tips around are use music that is familiar. Do have music, absolutely. Have it live is the ideal, but these are extraordinary times, so you may have to work with that just a little bit. Okay. I've seen some real interesting work with virtual choirs, where people in their homes are singing, and each of them records the track and it gets put together. It's a little bit of work, but it makes a really good link between the parish and the singers that they know and the people of God. At the same time, you might want to steer away from things like, the really big songs, your praise to the Lord, things like that. You may want to have something that's a little quieter, because again, what the live stream Mass is doing is it's a personal prayer experience. And so you need music that people would be happy to sing on their own, that they might want to hum on their way home from church, as much as the big Foursquare hymns. So you really need to have some adaptation going on.
Right, and maybe not sing everything, but the opening.
Absolutely. Well, you need to look at the Psalm, the Holy, the Memorial Acclamation, the Amen, those key pieces. There's a whole hierarchy, and always has been, a hierarchy of what needs to be sung at church.
Right. Sorry to interrupt.
At the bottom of the pile is the closing hymn of all things, which doesn't actually exist in the liturgy.
No.
It's not actually in the book. We do it out of custom, out of habit. But the most important things are the Eucharistic acclamations and the Psalm.
Yeah, so some music. Do you think that it's important? I mean, maybe the ministers, if they don't live together, maybe they can't share the sign of peace, and the people are at home. So is it appropriate for the priest, for the deacon, to say, exchange the sign of peace at home?
I don't know how appropriate it is, but I will tell you, every live stream Mass, and I've looked at a lot of them, all over Canada, all over the United States, you watch the little chat function on the side, people will be very respectful, very quiet. The sign of peace comes, and oh my goodness, dozens and dozens of peace be with you, peace be with you. It's one of the things that people want to do. They want to make that connection. So while there may not be a physical exchange of the sign of peace, the actual moment of peace needs to be part of the celebration still.
Mm-hmm. Okay, this is all really good advice. I hope every priest that's streaming, which I presume is every priest, is paying attention. Glenn, thank you so much. It was very, actually very useful to read the article. I do hope that a lot of people go to ocp.org and find the article. There's lots of really good information there. And hopefully we can all be a little better in how we proclaim the word through the internet.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'd love to talk to you anytime. Take care.
Thank you, Glenn.
And that's all for today. It's amazing how we don't hear much about what's happening in some places around the world, so it's good to hear from David Delgado from Jerusalem. And I love hearing from frontline workers. I think it's so important to hear the stories of doctors and nurses, like Marilyn Mudry. Are any of you nurses? Tell us about your experience. Also, how about those liturgical suggestions Glenn was giving Deacon Pedro for live streaming Mass? Wasn't that useful? Are you a priest trying to live stream Mass for the first time? Tell us your experience. Or if you've been watching Mass online, tell us what works for you and what doesn't. Share your comments with us by following Salt and Light Media on all of our social media platforms and commenting with the hashtag #HopeFromHome. If you miss any part of the episode, you can always rewatch them on our website, saltandlighttv.org/hopefromhome. We hope that these stories inspire you to stay positive and remind you that we're all still connected through hope.